All right, welcome to the Dorm Room Chat. We're talking about the politics of football. Today we're talking about development. My name's Dominic.
I'm Josh.
Yeah, let's introduce ourselves. So we're both members of Wake Forest University. Both have passions for football and passions for politics. Today I'm rocking a Swansea City kit.
San Jose Earthquakes, you already know.
And we're excited to get going, talking about international development and football in general. So I think the first thing we wanted to talk about was China. Obviously, China is a huge player in international development, but we wanted to look more into how football plays a role in China's plan for international development. So we divvied it up. We looked inside of China and outside of China. You want to talk about inside of China first?
So, when we're looking at China broadly, we have to understand China as a country that is really a global hegemon, and that they're looking to grow economically all the time. But they've kind of, over the last couple of years, they've hit a certain growth mark of about 5 to 6%. And now they're looking for ways to continue and perpetuate that growth. And one of the ways they're looking to do that is through football. And that's one of the reasons why Xi Jinping, he's a big football fan, and he's looking to really expand the domestic league. And they do that typically by investing in infrastructures within China, but also by expanding Chinese ownership of European teams such as West Bromwich Albion, Southampton, and teams such as that nature, particularly in England, in the Midlands of England. But they also look to expand into Africa and into to other spaces in the global south as a way of expanding the way that they understand politics.
Yeah.
And development and economic growth as well.
I think it's just crazy to see how fast this league has grown. I mean, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, you will see no one who wants to go to China to play football. But just with the amount of money they're offering, the league is getting more and more competitive. It's a place that people want to go to. And I think you have to give credit to the Chinese government for investing in this league. I
mean, it's down to like the central organization of everything, because you can say, hey, we want our domestic league to grow, and you can, orient state resources towards that.
Yeah.
But in America, you can't. In the case of MLS, you can't do that.
Exactly. It's not connected.
It's not connected, so you can't just say, hey, you know what? This company invests in this, or da 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 da. So you can't just flow money into this. It has to be kind of more organic. And in doing that, you can't be as intentional about building a strong league in the same way, and attracting talent in the same way. Because I remember when Graziano Pele signed right after the Euros a couple years ago. I was like, dang, Pele's like, he's really doing well.
Yeah.
But now he's just like, he's in Europe, and he's in China, and they pay well, and they attract some of the best talent. But there still is the stigma around it. But I think one of the reasons why you have this stigma, oh, China is the dead league. If you never want to pay for your international team again, you go to China. But in actuality, I think the way that they subvert that is by looking to invest in different regions. So like what they're doing at AFCON, for example.
Yeah, no, let's talk about that. It's fascinating. Maybe you don't see it on the surface, but China has invested everywhere. And in the African Cup of Nations, in the past 12 years or so, China has played a key figure in the development of infrastructure, in the funding of the tournament. And this is not done without reason. Obviously, they're looking for something. So if we look at Gabon, this was the last African Cup of Nations before Egypt. China invested a ton of money into the tournament. You see the Chinese president meeting with Gabon's president, Bonga, and just sharing this diplomatic relationship that is mutually beneficial, where China invests a ton of money, and in return, you see more and more of Gabon's economy linked to China. So actually 14.2% of all of Gabon's exports go to China. And what China's really interested in is the oil in Gabon. So China will invest a ton of money into building the infrastructure of these stadiums for the African Cup of Nations, and in return, they'll get a fair share of Gabon's exports.
Yeah, I mean, so it's just you know, the way that they're doing this investment, it's an extension of their infrastructure investment and development strategy. The idea that, you know, you have surplus resources from, you know, development in China, domestic development, and then you can export that. And you can export that. You can use, you know, your Chinese workers. You can use your Chinese technology to build these places. And not only are you, you know, investing and making use of your own domestic resources, that your surplus domestic resources, you're also really putting a footprint in, you know, in Gabon. You're putting a footprint in Angola. In the case of the 2019 AFCON, you're putting a footprint. Huawei has an incredibly large footprint in Egypt. You know, so it works for China. It works for China, and the thing about it is it's not just that it works for China. It also, you know, Gabon gets these stadiums. The fact that, you know, they use these stadiums, you know, distinctively for AFCON, and then after AFCON, what they do with these stadiums is a completely different conversation. Yeah. But in the immediate moment, it's win-win. But the thing about it is, it's complicated because we only see the fact that they built the stadium. But it's like, what else did they need? But like building the stadium can do a lot because of the fact that if a lot of people are going to AFCON, it's going to boost local economies. It's going to boost all of these aspects of development. It really could bring in true material development. But we have to also ask questions about longevity, and we have to ask questions of like, okay, China got 14% of Gabon's exports, but Gabon got 2 stadiums, and that's going to serve them for how long? You know what I'm saying? No,
100%. And I think this is to China's benefit. They do a really great job of these short-term projects that benefit them more in the long run than the country that they're working in. Yeah. One of the beauties of the Chinese international development policies is that they have the availability, just because of how their government works, to work so fast. Yeah. Just because the government is licensing those businesses, those corporations that go out and build this infrastructure, you can see these projects move in 1-2 years, and you'll see a stadium built in a different country. And this is something that the United States can't do. They can't license their own companies because they don't own them. Yeah. And I think this is why this has worked really, really well in the African Cup of Nations in a time where you need to build a lot of stadiums in a short amount of time. Yeah. All right, shifting gears a little bit, we talked about Gabon, and we not only want to talk about China and Gabon, but we want to talk about the world's favorite player, Lionel Messi. So back in 2015, when the African Cup of Nations was in Gabon, Lionel Messi took a visit to Gabon. He met with the president of Gabon, who reportedly paid him over $4 million to meet with him, open up the stadium, start building the project, and Messi accepted it. Do you want to talk a little more about that?
Yeah. So I think this Messi kind of thing is really interesting because of the fact that it just says a lot about, one, motivations for like how we use celebrities, and then celebrities' motivations for being used. Because Messi, it wouldn't be a stretch to say that Messi probably didn't really even understand what he was doing. Yep. He was just like, oh, it's a photo op for $4 million, but it's a lot more than a photo op for $4 million. It's, you know, it's an extension of the fact that like the ways that we go about developing the global South right now. It really is validity for those, and you know, we could say, hey, Messi and, you know, David Beckham and Didier Drogba, all of these players or former players or current players, whoever go out and, you know, they go and they do or in the case of Zidane and Ronaldo a couple years ago, they did a match for poverty. You know, the idea that these people think they're doing something good because of the way that we talk about development, because of the way that we go about, you know, really conceptualizing development, they think they're doing something good, but in actuality, it's perpetuating a system that doesn't actually, you know, develop anything. Yeah. And then, or if they develop it in a hegemonic or a really exploitative sort of way. Yeah. And in doing so, these players are just like, oh, we're just gonna fight poverty, da 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 da. But in actuality, it's much more than that. But the thing is, the people who do know that it's more than that know how these things work, know how these systems of development work, and in doing so, they really manipulate a lot of these players who think they're doing something into thinking that they're doing something good. In actuality, these players don't even recognize that they're kind of like pawns in a certain way to say, all right, we need funding, we need this UN funding to go here, we need this support for this refugee, or this refugee group, da 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 da. But in actuality, is it really going to work out to actually fundamentally improve their system? I mean, improve their well-being, improve how these people are moving, the people who quote need to be developed. How are we going about doing that? And the ignorance of a lot of these players is exploited in a lot of circumstances, particularly in the Messi circumstance. I mean, you see the intersections between neoliberalism and capitalism and all of these sort of larger structures that inform development in a way in soccer.
Yeah, to put things into context, Messi went into a country where the president at the time, Bongo, had many human rights abuses, was known for terrorizing citizens, silencing them, and it raises the question, should Messi be at fault for that? I mean, I don't certainly think that he knew this. I certainly think he has really, really good intentions, but oftentimes we see these celebrities that are just ignorant going into these situations that they'll receive criticism for. I think another great example of this is all those Coca-Cola, all those Pepsi commercials about development and celebrities in Africa. And I mean, what do these celebrities know, right? I mean, I think there's a certain amount of responsibility that they have to understand the problems that exist.
I mean, in the optics of it.
No, for sure.
Messi handing these black kids Pepsi. You know what I'm saying? The optics are terrible. The optics are hierarchical. Inevitably, and the thing is that hierarchy, it's internalized. It's so normalized that we can never really say, oh yeah, Messi did something wrong or being on that. I mean, we could, but it's also it's Messi. So Messi in and of himself, oh, he's just a footballer, blah, 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 but his position and his positionality is just so much more than that. And we just have to understand how these players can be used and co-opted in a way to manifest and perpetuate the systems and the ways that we go about developing and who we see as developed and who we don't see as developed.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think closing on that note with Messi, Messi is by no means a bad person, and I think we've seen many celebrities, many famous athletes do amazing things with their fame. For example, Mo Salah, he's reduced the amount of Islamophobia by a huge percentage in England alone, just by the mere fact that he's Egyptian and he's a Muslim. You see LeBron James in the United States, this isn't football, but seeing how he uses his fame, his influence, to influence for good in terms of education, what he's doing, building a school, even on a political sphere. So I think there are two sides to every story, but I think athletes, for the most part, can do themselves justice and understand a political context before entering a country and doing something like Messi did. Yeah.